In a moment, we're going to talk about how to fix finishing flaws, but the easiest way to fix them is to not have them occur in the first place. So let's show how to apply a polyurethane finish without creating drips in the first place. And if they do happen, we'll show how to remove them. The first stage is to dip your brush into a container of finish that's not from the original can. So for example, we poured this one in a mason jar, which is just the right size for what we need. And it has a lip that allows you to drain the brush before you begin applying the finish. Dip the brush in about a third of the way to load the bristles. Remember, you're not forcing the finish onto the surface, you're laying the finish on the surface. So drain the brush a little bit, begin away from the edge, and begin brushing toward the nearest edge. And the reason you do this is because the minute that brush touches the surface, it's going to leave a deposit. So what you want to do is take that deposit and spread it around toward the edge without having a big drip or a glob coming off of the edge. Then begin working a strip next to that one and allow the greatest amount of the finish to land more toward the center than the edge. You can always brush the excess out toward the edge. Now, we're not experiencing a lot of bubbling or a lot of problems here with the finish, but if we were, the solution to that would be to use just the tip of the brush, bring it down like this, pop those bubbles, and let the finish do the rest in the way of leveling itself out. Now, you'll notice I'm not making a lot of effort to brush back and forth and back and forth. Once you've spread the finish out, leave it alone. If you start going back over previously applied areas, all you're doing is creating brush strokes that will be harder for the finish to level out. Now, if you discover you've got too much finish on the surface or too much in your brush, just go over to a rag and drain off the excess. You'll dry out the brush just enough that you can come back and spread the excess finish where it's needed, across the surface. Notice that I never come at the surface from the edge. If I start from the edge, I start scraping off finish and it becomes a drip that I'll have to worry about later. When you're applying finish like this, it's always helpful to apply it under reflected light. The glare coming off of the surface is your way of telling whether you've got an even coat on, whether you've missed a spot, whether you've got a loose bristle that has blended in with a grain somewhere and won't show up until it's dried, or you've got some other finish flaw. So let's look at this under reflected light. Now, what was invisible under just the ambient light in the room shows up very clearly as a series of runs along here under this reflected light. So, easy enough to fix. All I need to do is drain some of the excess finish off of my brush and come back using just the tips of the bristles and no more runs. Now, you'll see some brush marks there, but given a few moments, even that will level off and you'll be back to a perfectly level finish. Sometimes, no matter how careful you are, a drip or a run is going to creep onto the surface of your finish and you're not going to find it until it's dry. But there are ways to remove it. Before you try that, though, allow the finish to dry completely. Otherwise, when you try to shave it off with a chisel or with a piece of glass, you're going to smear that still soft area across the surface and make a small problem even bigger. If the drip is near an edge, you can remove it by shaving it off with a sharp chisel with the bevel side up and the flat side pressed flat against the wood. For a problem that you can't reach with a chisel, use a piece of glass. I fastened a wooden handle to some scrap glass with a raw edge. The sharp edge of the glass works like a charm in cutting the high spot level with the surrounding finish. Keep the glass edge clean by wiping it with a rag. Work from several sides toward the center of the drip, then allow the gummy area at the center to dry. After this soft area is allowed to dry, you come back, sand this flat using 220 grit sandpaper, and then apply a second coat of finish to level off both the areas that you didn't have problems with and the ones where you did.